Hi, welcome to Spalsh Go. Nate Ryan here with Dustin Long of NBCSports.com. And Dustin, the X Factor wild card, whatever you want to call it, Talladega Superspeedway looms this Sunday, middle race of the second round of the playoffs. And some drivers in trouble after mechanical problems and other issues at Dover. Joey Logano is one, Chase Elliott is another. And what I'm interested in, Dustin, is manufacturer alliances have been such the story the last few races at Daytona, at Talladega. When Chase Elliott won at Talladega earlier this year, it was because Chevys were told only help other Chevys. Dale Jarrett had something interesting to say on the NASCAR NBC podcast this week. He thinks that Chevy drivers might have to back off that a little bit, especially if you're Chase Elliott or if you're William Byron and you're right around that playoff cut line coming out of Dover. You might be working with other manufacturers. If you find yourself between two Fords with 20 laps to go, so be it. How do you think that'll play this weekend at the Talladega Garage with Chevy teams and Chevy itself?
Okay, well, the ultimate goal is since 2016 when Jimmy Johnson won the championship, is the last time Chevrolet's had a driver in the championship four. So if you're Chevrolet, you got to get a car in the championship four. So you work together as much as you can. There's also understanding that at the end of the race, if you've got to go and it's in front of a Ford car or a Toyota car, go. You've got to make that move. But before you get to that point, I think you've got to work together. I think you've got to help your brothers out and your extended teammates. Now, it does create some issues. And talking with some drivers at Dover, it's just like you've got some guys in the Chevy camp who aren't in the playoffs, some who are fighting to remain in, like you mentioned, and some guys that in a little bit better spot. And those dynamics are going to change. I mean, for example, I talked with a guy like Ty Dillon. I said, look, you're trying to win your first race, a cup race of your career. Do you have to back off and let somebody, a Chevy teammate, move up because they need it for the playoffs? And he says, sometimes in some situations, I may have to look at the big picture, and I may have to consider that. So those are things that are going to have to be discussed, and everybody's going to probably have a different way of how they look at it. I think everybody works together until 20 laps to go, and I think then it's a free-for-all.
How does that help Ty Dillon? I mean, does Richard Childress Racing, or in that case, I guess Germain Racing, get it back on the back end somewhere in the future that they'll remember that Ty Dillon helped push Chase Elliott to a win or something?
Well, I mean, Ty's point is, look, I'm still young. I hope to be racing. I plan to be racing in the playoffs and in championships down the road. So I would hope that if I'm in that situation and I need the help, that it is reciprocated to me when I'm in that situation. So he's looking down the road, big picture, because he's like, look, I feel like I'm going to be in the spot. So why hurt myself now for next year, 2 years, or 3 years down the road when that's my best shot to win the championship and somebody doesn't help me, and now I've lost that opportunity for as hard as it is to win this thing.
Yeah, so certainly the Chevy drivers, as we mentioned, are in some trouble. We've got Chase Elliott 7 points below the cut line, William Byron right on the cut line, Alex Bowman, the other Hendrick Chevy driver, 17 points above, but he obviously needs to be mindful as well as the points. Now, the Ford drivers, though, Logano at right below the cut line, and then you got Boyer 4 points below, Blaney 22 points below. 3 of the 4 drivers below right now are Ford drivers, and Ford would seem to be in a favorable position, right? Because they have strength in numbers going to Talladega.
Well, I mean, Chevys, with the way the Chevys have worked together, they've have as many cars and they have strength, strength in numbers too. They can contend against the Ford cars. It's the the Toyotas, and I talked with Denny Hamlin at Dover, and he's like, look, we don't have the numbers. We've got to figure some things out. But I think Ford's in they're in a good spot. But again, they have that interesting dynamic like we talk about. Is Boyer needs points, Blaney needs points, Logano. We know how Joey Logano races.
Yeah, so. We do now after Dover. Yeah.
Well, I mean, look, if you didn't know how Joey Logano raced before Dover, then shame on you. But yeah, I mean, how hard he races. So, like I said, I think everybody works together in all the different camps. I think Toyota's got an interesting thing because I think they're going to have to start picking and choosing off some people. But I think you work together till 20 laps to go, and then it's just like, let's just see what happens.
Yeah, Stewart-Haas dominated this race a year ago, and it seems like Fords have been the strongest, both in terms of the volume and quality of cars. Let's end on Toyota. I think you bring up an interesting point there. Truex, Hamlin, Kyle Busch are all well above the cut line. Yeah. Truex more than a full race above. Hamlin and Busch both 48 points above. There's only really 5 Toyotas in this race. DJ on the podcast also said that he thinks that they could lag back and maybe play the strategy that we've seen before. We haven't seen it as much in stage racing, but maybe sandbag a little bit.
And you could see that, although I'm sure Kyle Busch would suddenly have flashbacks to 2014 when he went into that Talladega race, which was an elimination race at that time, second in the points, rode around the back, got wrecked from behind, and was the one guy who failed to advance. So, I think there's some interesting ways of looking at it. You look at what this package does, the big runs, the blocking that's still going on, and the challenges that creates. We've had, some of the wrecks. There was a wreck at Talladega earlier this year that was at the front of the field. There were a couple wrecks at Daytona in July that were at the front of the field because there were guys blocking and guys making big runs and that combination. So normally you want to be at the front because you figure that's the safest place. I don't know if being at the front is the safest place anymore. Maybe it makes sense to run at the back.
Or even mid-pack maybe just to play for points. Instead of
again, you get kind of, do you want to be around some of the squirrels around there? So, it's wherever you feel safest. And if you still feel like you're safest at the front and you know what's happened this year at some of the races, then you go to the front. If you feel like, hey, I need to go to the back and I'm in a good enough points position, then I'm willing to give up those stage points, then do that. I think it'll be interesting to see some of the dynamics and how people play that out this weekend because I think there'll be a lot of different strategies.
Yeah, a lot of strategies for teams to debate as they head into Talladega this Sunday. A lot to talk about then on Motor Mouths right here at this desk Wednesday, 5 p.m. Eastern on NBCSN. We'll have Kyle Busch joining Motor Mouths to talk Talladega and all things championship, so tune in for that. Thanks for watching Splash and Go.
Hey Motorsports fans, thanks for watching. Make sure you hit subscribe before you go for all the latest news and highlights across motorsports.